Good afternoon on what is a bright, warm and breezy day. It is Wednesday the 29th of June. I have a nice hot cup of tea. And a parcel to unbox. Okay. And what I have in there is this, which is Cults of Cthulhu for Call of Cthulhu. This is a supplement dedicated to the concept of cults, and in particular cults dedicated to the great old one, Cthulhu himself. Now it's interesting to note that Call of Cthulhu was 40 years old last year, and it hasn't had a book or supplement really devoted to cults at all in that time. And no matter how how those cults play such a significant role in a great many of the campaigns for this role-playing game, whether that's the Cult of the Bloody Tongue or the the Brotherhood of the Beast, and is it basically the Brotherhood of the Black Pharaoh? Essentially, those that connected to campaigns like Masters of Nyarlathotep, or Day of the Fungi from Yuggoth, or Day of the Beast, and Order of the Silver, Hermetic Order of the Silver Twilight from Shadows of Yog-Sothoth. No actual book dedicated to cults in all that time. So, there have been articles here or there. For example, I believe in the Keeper's Companion volumes, which are very good if you can get hold of them. Lots of good information in there. But really, this is the first book dedicated to cults in Call of Cthulhu. So, at long last, indeed, the intricacies of the Cthulhu cult are revealed. Cult of Cthulhu guides you in the creation of complex and believable antagonists for your favourite scenarios and campaigns. Villains who are more than just the faceless minions who embody the most terrifying threat of the Cthulhu mythos. Inside, you'll find a history of the Cthulhu cults from the Victorian era to the modern day. 5 Cthulhu cults ready to be incorporated into your games, detailed guidance on designing cults and their leaders, including a special cults worksheet, profiles for a range of cultists, new monsters, new artifacts and new spells, 3 scenarios concerning Cthulhu cults spanning Gaslight, Victorian, modern day and the signature 1920s setting. Cults of Cthulhu delves into the human side of the dark and horrific world of those who worship the dead yet dreaming abomination known as Great Cthulhu. And it carries a warning for mature readers. This book deals with mature themes and is intended for mature players. So there we go, that's on the back, as well as a description of what Call of Cthulhu is. So inside, well, again, just as you would expect from Chaosium of 2022, this is a handsome looking book, full colour, and we start off with, let's get to, there's the table of contents, facing Great Cthulhu himself, and we've got a list of contents as well as a mature content warning, because essentially we are dealing with abominable people who do abhorrent things in the name of their deity of choice. So we've got introduction, and this is followed by essentially a breakdown of what's in the book, and then we get into the history of the Cthulhu cult itself. And it starts off with the Cthulhu cult is mentioned sparingly in Lovecraft's fiction. The Call of Cthulhu and the Shadow over Innsmouth being the 2 major exceptions, but even within those stories the author says little about what they are and how they actually operate. So this chapter's primary purpose is to present a fleshed out history of the Cthulhu cult, while also attempting to preserve some of the mystery surrounding it. So, it's trying to really develop it ready for to bring to the table, but keep it sort of like still mysterious. So we've got preface on Cthulhu, and of course the Awakening of Cthulhu, what every dedicated, as we say, devoted Cthulhu cultist wants. And we have a discovery of the beliefs and a timeline of Cthulhu worship, beginning with in a cult of Sumner or Sumer, Cthulhu in Rome, Iran, City of Cthulhu, the Royal Cthulhu Cult of Japan, Witch Cult, the Cult of Cthulhu is 1486, the subterranean world of Zionian, or we see Zion, in 1545, Coven of Norfolk, Cult of Fiji. So you've got really kind of set of different cults there, just giving thumbnail descriptions of their activities and what they were doing, so that if you were a keeper, you could sort of like delve into these in a bit more detail and develop them, because obviously the focus of this supplement is in essentially the periods of play that the main basically the role-playing game focuses on, which is Cthulhu by Gaslight, Cthulhu in the 1920s, the Jazz Age, and of course modern age Cthulhu. Of course, we've got the infamous Louisiana swamp cult, which you will recognise from the Call of Cthulhu short story itself, and the other one being other counterparts of that is from the Escape from Innsmouth, or Shadow over Innsmouth, I should say, which is the esoteric order of Dagon, and then we get into modern cults after World War II. So lots there. We've even got a Carnival of Cthulhu, the Glenview Middle School 5. All the way up to the Oregon Standoff 2001, leaving more or less the last 20 years for the keeper to really develop his or her own content. Chapter 2, we have specific cults of Cthulhu. We'll get the pages to part. Sticky, so elevated order of Morpheus, so hiding essentially behind the Greek myths, so that's 1896, and this is broken down, you know, you've got background, and then history, structure, and goals. So much more detail than the early cult descriptions, so you can easily much more easily bring this into play within the given gaming periods for Call of Cthulhu. We have discussion of sort of like, you know, structure, financing, everything you kind of really want to know, recruitment, sample members, and notable members of the cult, who very much do like to dress for their best. And then we get on to, we actually have the Louisiana swamp cult described in detail as well, so that's expanded upon from the actual short story, The Call of Cthulhu, including we have a depiction of the Cthulhu idol itself. And this is actually quite shorter because it's less organised in a sense. It's not so stratified by class as such as the Order of Morpheus was. So we're very quickly onto sample members. No top hats there though. So there we go. 4 stats, of course, all ready to bring into play as NPCs. and then we have the Society of Angelic Ones. Yeah, okay, so we have even a site of worship pictured there. That's going to make an interesting handout, should the player characters ever get hold of it. But, let's see. So, yeah, typical members of the Cult of Angelic Ones. And there's also options at the end of each section for alternatives, you know, what might be moved to other locations, or other times, and then esoteric order of the Dagon. So that switches to Innsmouth. And then we have an actual depiction of the sort of like the worship at the shore, and then, of course, the infamous Innsmouth gold. And then we have the 3 oaths of Dagon. Now, to some extent, this has, of course, been visited previously with someone Escape from Innsmouth, but that was really about going in and knocking the cult out rather than actually detailing the cult as such. And here we have more depictions of the cultists, far more physically obvious that if not their deformity, their transformation is actually a better term there. And then various members of the cult. And then we have the Church of Perfect Science. So this one is a much more modern cult, founded in 1952, and it's still active, presumably. I've actually got some images of them to be actually at work doing their scientific research. This is actually quite a lengthy tome. There's quite a lot of information in here, the different cults and so on. Various sample members, again. And then we get into advice for creating a cult. So that's guidance here. Why create a cult, Cthulhu cult, and actually creating a cult, and saying uniqueness of the Cthulhu cult. And I think that's one of the things to kind of aim for. What's different about this cult? What's different and interesting about this cult that sets it aside from, any other cult? So taking the steps from, it says, why create a Cthulhu cult? A cult is an emotionally powerful group of antagonists. A lone sorcerer or interdimensional monster can be exciting adversaries, but a cult offers its own unique style of intrigue and horror. Cults are people, ordinary people who ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time, trusting a person who probably doesn't have their best interest at heart. On some level, we all understand this. Everyone has been deceived by someone we trusted and knows the pain it can inflict, or just to our feelings. Not just to our feelings, but to our faith in our fellow men. For some people, it's easier to believe the deception than it is to admit the fraud. The ultimate reward promised to the cultist can be so alluring that they push aside any doubt or pangs of conscience to attain the goal. That's why that's the underpinning to the cult. In between the guidance, we've got a lovely illustration of Great Cthulhu looming over the southern island of Rillier, obviously recently arisen. We have options in here for the cultist leader and his role, and essentially it's a guide to creating your cult leader profile. Description and personality, So you've got tables for that. Book reference skills, sources of power, and again, all sort of up to building sort of something that is interesting, unique, and when it's enters play, your players and their investigators will be intrigued, horrified, and hopefully scared of it. And we've got tables of cult wants, so that's goals. Sorry, so that's wants and means. And then we get on to cult structure, and there's been cult structure tables throughout, and here's got a sample one. So we got here, creating cultists, cult initiation, and cult accounting, with a rather nice parody of the famous painting, and then taking care of cultists, acquiring books and magical artifacts, because obviously the cult wants more knowledge and power, and knowledge certainly leads to power, because the more mythos you know, the more you can understand it, the more you can work it. And essentially here we've got things covering things like buying illegal supplies, paying legal or business fees and so on, bribes, etc. All sort of the things that the cult will do, whether it's essentially to give itself a cover and keep it as an organisation, or to cover up for its obviously illegal activities. Well, not obviously illegal activities, because it's covered them up. And then we get to cults and the supernatural, and beginning to put it together. As you can see, so throughout we've got quite a lot of examples, which it's not all theory. There is some practice in there, and that's a great addition. And then we have cult workflow charts and worksheets, so tables all ready for you as the keeper to create and record your cult. There we go. So actually quite a lengthy worksheet example here. Before we get on to cults, monsters and artifacts, beginning with guidelines for adjusting the cultist archetypes. So we've got a basic one, then we've got academic cultists, blue-collar cultists, criminal cultists, and so on. So archetypes which you can bring into play without doing all necessarily doing all the prep work. So even down to a young cultist and a law enforcement cultist. And then blessings, Cthulhu's blessings, whole list of benefits and benefits that essentially that the Great Old One essentially can bestow upon his devotees. And then we go step up to the Deathless Masters, who essentially who direct and control the worship of Cthulhu, Great Cthulhu, around the world. And there are some quite amazing figures in there. You go back into Cthulhu history, Call of Cthulhu history, and you've got some notable members. Carl Stanford, of course, is being the most well known. So we're looking at what is a Deathless Master, undying power, listing their common spells. Let's see if we've got any stats for any particular persons, and we're taking into consideration things like rebirth and regeneration, because they will actually they might die, but they can return. And then we've got pulp considerations too, if you want to combine it with Pulp Cthulhu, and baseline Deathless Master stats there, to which the keeper adds the adjustments that she wants. So yes, we actually have examples of Deathless Masters, and absolutely applaud the authors of this book. They know their Call of Cthulhu history, so yes, we have Carl Stanford, Immortal Sorcerer there, and then to keep it, we also got adjustments to make him a pulp villain as well. That's a nice adjustment, and of course Carl Stanford easily works into a lot of the various essentially Cthulhu settings. So obviously, you know, you could possibly encounter him in Cthulhu by Gaslight, or down darker trails to the Weird West. Then of course the Jazz Age, and right through to the 1980s, 90s and beyond to the present day. So various other monsters in there as well. I'd like probably a few more Deathless Masters as examples, but there we go. And then we continue on with so essentially we actually get to the monsters themselves. So we've got artifacts. So idols of from Relier, Cthulhu statues of Fabius. Again, all things that the investigators can find and in possession of the cultists, and more. We've got variants of new spell variants. So yes, yet more spell variants. Essentially, it's always the problem. Okay, you bring out new supplements and you've got a book of spells, but you know you've added yet more spells. And then we get on to the first of the scenarios, which is Loki's gift. And we've got essentially we've got illustrations for all the NPCs. Then we've got a connection table as well. That's a nice touch. As well as a timeline, and this is set during Cthulhu. We've got Gaslight, so this is set in London. So you've got the map of London. It's basically the venue for the cult. Nice cartography there. Nice set of floor plans. And then this all leads up to a ritual which is essentially going to take place on stage, because that's where everybody congregates. So you've got a theatre complete with an orchestra pit and stage there. And then the next one is Angel's Thirst, and that brings it up to the 1920s. This one is actually dealing with Cthulhu cultists and potentially as Deepborn hybrids. You can tell by the strangely bulging eyes there. And more so with these illustrations. Let's keep going, because there's one more scenario to look at, and this takes place in Los Angeles. So that's utterly different from, you would think, okay, Cthulhu cultist, you might put it in Innsmouth, but really this switches across to Los Angeles. It is quite basically it's a nice change of atmosphere and weather as well. And this you've got shipping involved, which I think is always it's a big port, so it's your deep one cultists always want to be by the sea, so having a shipping facilities is always good. And you have the strange structure, which I showed you the map of. So yeah, you can see it. You can see it there, and there it is. There's the floor plans. So quite a lot to look at in here. And then we get on to the third scenario, A God's Dream. And this is the modern one. Essentially, there's a bit more going on here than perhaps the investigators are aware of, so I won't spoil that. It's a bit more interesting, and this moves to Chicago. So getting around a bit. So yeah, lots of detail, quite a long and lengthy scenario. This one involved sort of like more scientific research and encounters, and even there's a perfect science museum, you know, for that cult as well. And then we have the first appendix, which is inspiration. So that includes movies, fiction, television, nice editions all. Then we have Cthulhu and Mythos tomes. Again, useful, basically, because that helps bring in flavour and detail for the keeper. And then everything else, we've essentially got a lengthy section of collected player maps and handouts. So that's all that's there. Before we get down to the index and the worksheets. So yeah, that is Cults of Cthulhu for Call of Cthulhu, published by Chaosium Inc. I think it's a fantastic looking source book for the game. I really hope that this is going to spur the authors to write some more cults books, not to Cthulhu himself, but I'm certainly sure that Nyarlathotep deserves a book like this. In fact, it's somewhat like Nyarlathotep sort of like probably deserves, well, accordingly he has essentially 666 faces or masks, so who knows how many volumes you could devote to him. But yeah, there are other gods out there which deserve the same similar treatment. But as essentially a great old one who is integral to the role-playing game and appears in the title of the role-playing game itself, this really is a very nice supplement, answering sort of like the call of Cthulhu, as it were. So yes, Cult of Cthulhu. I'm looking forward to getting into that, giving it a proper review, the link to which you'll find down below. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook. If you have, please do click on the like button down below. And if you've got any comments or feedback, I appreciate you taking the time to post those. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to yet more unboxings in the Nook, where you will see me out here with a parcel containing a book or game which I will unbox and chat about to the best extent of my knowledge, roughly 10 minutes or so, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea. Then please do hit that subscribe button. Once again, thanks for watching. I'll be back again soon with another unboxing in the Nook. Bye for now.